Welcome to the Spoilercast for Rehydrate. This episode will contain spoilers for all of The Three-Body Problem, The Dark Forest, and Death's End. If you don't want to be spoiled on future events, please skip this episode. This is Season 5, Episode 1, The Staircase Program, where we will be discussing Part 1 of Death's End by Lucy Shin. My name is Amin, and I've only read up to the end of Part 1 of Death's End.
My name is Thalia. I've listened to the entire series, and I'm rereading along with the Spoilercast. The only exception is Death's End, which is my favorite, which I have read probably 3 times in full.
Hey, this is Dan. I've read the entire series, and I've also read Death's End a bunch of times.
So Dan, you want to talk about the upcoming interviews?
Show updates wise, I still run the Rehydrate interview series. It's kind of slowed down, but if you'd like to be part of it, please feel free to contact us and happy to have you on. But I did do a very cool interview the other day with the translator for some of Lucy Shin's other works. And we talked about, he hasn't read this series, but we talked a lot about his experience with translating stuff from Chinese to English and some of his experiences with sci-fi and other kind of stories that he's working on. So it should be out soon. So I encourage everyone to listen. I think it was really interesting.
And subscribe.
And follow and smash that like button or whatever people do.
Does he have a name, or is it a secret?
Oh, his name's Adam.
Oh, okay.
I'm excited about this new season. Yeah, if you have an interesting set of opinions, definitely contact Dan and we can get you on the interview series.
All right. Well, speaking of Death's End, let's go into the summary for this chapter. So just briefly, the summary for this chapter is, so we start with the four-dimensional fragment in Constantinople. Yuan Tianming buys Chengxing DX3906 and then tries to die. Chengxing endures Wade's psychological torture and comes up with the staircase program. They send Yuan Tianming brain somewhere out in space, and that's sort of flown off course at the last moment. And Chengxing hibernates into the future. So I wanted to start first. I mean, you had something you specifically wanted to bring up on the Spoilercast around the Table of Errors. I know I've been harping a lot about the Table of Errors being a spoiler and the chapter names being a spoiler, but you didn't think so.
No, I don't care about spoilers. So as soon as, I think this was towards the end of season 3, Dan said, well, don't look at the Table of Errors at the beginning of this book because it'll spoil everything for you. So of course I ran and looked at it, and other than outlining the number of years this book is going to cover, I didn't feel like there were a lot of spoilers in it. Like I knew it was going to start in Constantinople. I knew it was going to end thousands of years from now. But other than that, even as a slightly more than just casual reader, I didn't get a lot of insights from that. So I'm still curious. Aside from spoiling the scope of the book, I'm not sure what else it spoils.
I think the main thing that I was trying to get after was when the last jump in the Table of Errors, like jumped 16 million years into the future. Like, I think that's a pretty big spoiler to me. The book really revolves around how the universe is eventually going to end, if it's going to just slowly drift apart, or if it's going to be able to recollapse on itself and kind of do another big bang. And the jump in the future, I mean, it's a hard leap to make, in your mind to think that that's what's going to happen. But to me, it's like it gives too much away of like where and when the story is going to go to by reading the Table of Errors. And that's why I prefer to skip it, or I prefer people to skip it if they are averse to spoilers like I am. But again, you are not.
Definitely.
So. I think I did read it though when I first read it. It didn't color my opinion. And as I was reading it again, I was looking through the chapter breakings again in the ebook. Anyway, they have like a table of contents with like every chapter name, and I think that's even more of a spoiler.
Yeah. Once again, here's the plug for audiobooks. You won't have a choice. You won't get to read any table of contents, and they'll just announce Crisis Era, and then one day it's just Bunker Era, and you're like, wait, what? When did we move? And then you'll just have to learn about it. I'm not averse to audiobooks, that's all.
Yeah. I think especially like the chapters and the chapter titles in this book are even more spoilery, because like at the end of next episode, we'll get to like the last 10 minutes of the deterrence era and that kind of stuff, It's like, well, what's going to happen I guess the deterrence era is over. Like, what's going to happen there? So it's just kind of it kind of cut, and then you're thinking about it. It's like when you're watching a TV show and like there's like 2 minutes left. You're like, well, this is going to wrap up soon. So it's sort of like that.
And I think the other part of it is, I guess I didn't give a lot of critical thought to what the eras mean. Like, I didn't give a lot of thought to what is the deterrence era or what could it possibly be. I was just like, oh, this is an era that covers this much time, and this is about how far it is from where Dark Forest ended. So maybe that's the other reason I did not find the eras, the list of eras, to be as egregious as Dan was threatening to make it out to be.
Yeah, so let's do a little fun experiment here. More us probing Amin on like what he thinks things are going to mean. So the next big you know what the crisis era is, and you know what the deterrence era is. We've told you a bunch of times that that's the era where the kind of like standoff with the Trisolarians. So then we have the broadcast era. So can you guess what that means? And to me that seems kind of obvious.
Yeah, I'm guessing there's some signal being broadcast out to the Trisolarians or received from the Trisolarians.
Not really.
Okay.
Not really?
Let's give it to him.
It's not to the Trisolarians. It's that they broadcast the coordinates of Trisolaris. So like the deterrence era ends because they broadcast the coordinates.
Oh, I see.
Well, that's not actually true. There's a little bit more that happens in there.
That's not very nice of them.
Not very nice. That's right.
But wait, isn't that mutually assured destruction if they do that?
Well, it's because the Trisolarians already destroyed us. Like they already the deterrence era fails because Chengxin takes over the deterrence from Luo Ji and doesn't invoke it, and the Trisolarians take advantage of that, take over the Earth, and commit broad scale genocide.
You will read about it, though. What do you think about what happened here in part 1? We talked about kind of a strange diversion. Like if you opened up this book and started reading about Constantinople, you might think I'm in the wrong book. Like I definitely did.
Yeah, and I mentioned this on the main podcast, but I liked the diversion. I thought the story itself, I thought it was a good, small, self-contained story that was interesting, and perhaps I like historical fantasy fiction or whatever you call this, but I would have been fine reading a whole book about Constantinople and witchcraft. And
there's more self-contained fiction coming up.
Whoa, I'm intrigued. Yeah, so I like that. Again, I'm not sure how it connects to everything else, but I like that part of it quite a bit.
So I'll again come back as a tangent when you're talking about historical fiction. The interview I just did with Adam, the book he's currently working on is a translation of a book that's in China that is made into a TV show here. It's called The Longest Day in Chang'an. It's historical fiction, and so if you're interested in Chinese historical fiction, I would probably recommend that book because I've started watching the TV show before, and it seemed my wife also really recommended it. So it's from the Tang Dynasty, I think he said. I forget, but Chang'an is the old capital of China, and it's like about intrigue and that kind of stuff. Have you seen that or read that?
No, I've taken some courses on Chinese history, and the Tang era is romanticized in pretty much all of current Chinese like poems and stories and movies, and it's sort of understandable. It does sort of sound like a very interesting dynamic city center. So I would actually be interested in reading that if your wife recommends it.
Yeah, she really recommended the TV show. I don't know if she read the book, but yeah. So Adam is translating that into English, but I mean, you could read it in Chinese, I guess, but I could not.
Very, very, very slowly. I really tore through this book in English, that is. So I kind of like reading these interesting parts very quickly. So I actually had to go back and reread, as I did for the Spoilercast, about the Yangdong chapter. I think I understood the sort of the parts that pay off very quickly, like Yun Tianming, we meet him and he's like immediately dying, and then euthanasia is brought in very quickly, so it's easy to track. But the whole chapter about Yangdong, she's been referred to a lot, like in all 3 books, but this is the first time really like understanding why she felt the way she did, what she found out about her mother, and I didn't get that on the first pass. Would you say that left any kind of an impression on you the first time you read it?
I think it did not, but it definitely did on subsequent readings for sure. And I think not her specifically, but like the concepts they bring up, and I think the kind of parallels.
Well, that's always the problem. It's never really about the character, is it?
Right. Yeah, I think specifically like where she's talking about, her and the other guy are talking about how life like the planet does not only make life possible, but life makes the planet possible, and how that kind of parallels or could parallel to the universe. But the scientist is like, I don't know, I don't know if there's stuff out there, and then she like knows like that there's even more color to it.
He goes
right?
even further. He says like, well, life is very rare.
Yeah.
And she just sort of like, is it now? Because she knows more than he does.
Right. Except for like, the other alien race, it's like super close to us.
Except literally our closest star has has advanced life.
Yeah. So I thought that part was it was more interesting on subsequent reads, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of interesting to like, oh, okay, Yang-dong, that's interesting. And she found out this is where she found out her mother. And then, it doesn't click with you immediately that like, it's especially like as we get further in the book, like how that all kind of ties in.
Well, shall we tease the identity of who she was talking to, or keep that a secret until the end?
I saw your note about it. I didn't pick up on it myself.
Sure. So, Amin, do you remember like why Yang-dong is in this lab? Like she's actually talking to someone else. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that. No.
Then it's probably not important enough.
He's just referred to as green glasses.
Yeah, she's talking to a physicist who is sort of giving her his opinion on the universe and saying that life is necessary for the world to be as it is, but it's not it's negligible on the scale of the universe. And they leave after a very short interaction. It's only later that is revealed to be a much younger Ding Yi, the physicist.
When is it revealed? I don't remember it being revealed. When is that?
I guess we'll have to tag along to the end of Death's End. Anyway.
Yeah, I really don't remember that. It's very possible I missed it. But weren't they were dating, right? Maybe this is afterwards. Like I guess like the timeline gets kind of screwy, right? I don't know like how long after she realizes that her mother, that she
later they start dating, but I think this is them meeting.
Thalia, going back to the Constantinople chapters, I mean, obviously it's a big kind of, like you said, like it's a shift in tone and a shift in, is this the right book? I think similar to Three Body Problem.
Yeah, like because I was listening, not reading, I couldn't flip back. I was like, what am I listening? I went backward and forward, and I was like, no, I'm looking for this book about aliens. Anyway, I did sort of question its utility, but it was enjoyable. I wondered, you had introduced it at the top of the show as like a 4-dimensional fragment. And I'm wondering, is that actually confirmed? All we know is that she's clearly able to remove things from sealed places. I'm wondering if it's too fantastic to imagine, like, why does it have to be 4? What if she found a 5-dimensional fragment where there's more than one axis to time?
That's true. It could be more, but they do specifically say the age of magic began at 4:00 in the afternoon of May 3rd, 1453, when the high dimensional fragment first intersected with the Earth. It ended at 9:00.
It's just high dimensional.
Yeah, could be more than 4. I was assuming like it was mirroring the 4-dimensional pockets that we see later on. I think they specifically call 4-dimensional. That's why I assumed it was 4-dimensional.
I think it's a cosmological question, though. Like, I don't know if in his theory of the universe, can 5 and 3-dimensional worlds interact, or does 5 have to collapse down into 4 before it can collapse into 3? Because later we talk about the dual vector foil collapses things, obviously, into 2 dimensions. And then later Guan Yifan is saying, there are civilizations trying to collapse things into 1 dimension, but we've never seen any evidence of it. And that maybe made me think that maybe you can't skip, or you have to go through. But if not, maybe there's just like an 11-dimensional fragment floating around somewhere.
Yeah.
And the same way Guan Yifan said, like, maybe humans have seen it, but humans really have not been around all that long.
Right.
Ding Yi even talks about, very quickly, millions of years, which is very quick on geologic terms, which is, again, a bit of foreshadowing. And it reminds me that humans have been around like way less than 1% of how long dinosaurs have been around. So if anyone would have encountered one of these high dimensional fragments, like it probably wasn't Constantinople, it was probably a dinosaur.
Actually, Tim mentioned something interesting on the kind of offhand, like his assumption is about the fragment was that it's alien technology, but it's not really alien technology.
No, not really.
Yeah, but like I was like,
if anything, 3D is alien technology.
Yeah, there's aliens in the 4-dimensional space. Like when we get to the ring part.
Well, only because they fled there.
Yeah, but the pocket itself is not alien. So I don't know. I didn't say anything because I don't want to spoil anything, obviously. But yeah, how to refer to it is an
Of
interesting
course.
question.
Well, it's so interesting that he would guess that because that's almost sort of a cop out. If you can say like it's aliens, it's sort of the same criticism or question rather that I think Liu Cixin is challenging his audience with, which is about God. Are we here on this wonderful planet with lots of water and summers and Caribbean beaches because of God? Because it doesn't seem possible if you just look at the physics. Like if there had been one extra atom, we would have never existed, or like there would have been no matter in the universe, just time and space. So how can we possibly explain all these things? Some people say God, or some people will say aliens. And I think he's maybe challenging that in the same way that he's saying that life is responsible for the universe and vice versa. But we can't stay in Constantinople forever. A lot happens in part one.
Definitely. So I guess, do you have any thoughts around, did you have any thoughts when you first read it about going back to studying this book back in the Crisis Era when we actually get into the story? Were you disappointed that we spent so much time in the future with the cool future technology, and now we're going back to basically the start of the Crisis Era, which is, more or less modern times? Do you have any recollection of like what your thoughts were there?
Oh, yeah. I don't mind going back into the Crisis Era. I don't mind that it's like near future. I know euthanasia is like semi-legal, semi-illegal, semi-possible, and perhaps some forms of hibernation on a very short scale. So just sort of extending that runway and entertaining the story where these things are available and legal. It's pretty interesting to me. And again, it gives me hope for, I won't even jump into this corner that we sometimes have on our show of like, how could they adapt this? But it seems very natural and very easy that we could start integrating parts of this book 3 into the same season or the same movie as, the last book that we spent a lot of time on.
The interesting part also about this return to the Crisis Era is that it seems like humans are more flailing around. That's what our sense, like we're kind of like flailing around like any kind of thing that we can do. Like, I don't know, what can we do to defeat the Trisolarans? Let's fire a brain into space. Maybe that'll work.
Maybe it's better than being complacent. What do you think?
But yeah, it really much. It seems like we're just kind of doing shots in the dark here, and this book in particular, and this part of the Crisis Era, seems to hammer that home a little bit more than I think, to me, that the Wallfacer program did. The Wallfacer program is also kind of a shot in the dark too,
but they both worked. Like both of those shots in the dark, they did work. Like let's fire a brain into space, it worked.
Right. But at the time, like everyone's like, what? You're gonna do what? You'll shoot a brain into space? Like, okay, we got to do something, right? We got to like placate the public. There was a phrase that was in the Pass Outside of Time or the book inside the book. They talk about the infantilism or something, where like we're just kind of like being infants in the crisis, and like we're trying to just grasp for something in these trying times. And it does seem more pronounced in this part of the Crisis Era than it ever was in the first one, where it seemed more rooted in like actual like interesting ideas, like that most of them don't pan out, like Diaz. And
I have a question for Amin, I think. So we have in this part 1 Yun Tianming, who's sitting on his hospital bed, and he's sort of in the class of people who think it's ridiculous to worry about anything that's happening 400 years in the future, even if it's like the total destruction of your whole humankind and it's assured and it's happening. He thinks like nothing at that scale of 400 years in the future is worth worrying about. Which side of that debate do you think you would be on?
I think the total destruction of the planet, I would slightly worry about that, but most other things, I think on a 400-year timescale, it would be tough for me to imagine the implications in the future, so I wouldn't really worry about it that much. Like people in the Jamestown colonies in Virginia, they weren't worried about, I don't know, fake news or whatever people today worry about. So it seems, it just seems like the destruction of the planet rises to the level of something I would care about, but probably not much more than that. How about you?
In the same way that we here in the West might think about like, really, really old people at least in our lifetime, really, really old people might have lived through World War II, maybe. And then their parents, who we aren't even able to speak to, would have memories of World War One. And in China, the way that Yun Tianming is talking about how absurd it is to think 400 years ago is he's saying, like, it was the Ming Dynasty. Like, not only did our form of government not exist, not even the most recent dynasty, the, like, 1900s dynasty, that wasn't even founded yet. That's how old it was. And he even talks about the guy who eventually is this Jurchen general who eventually sets the stage for the Qing dynasty. And I thought that was possibly because Nurhachi's era name was Tianming, and I wondered if that was done on purpose. But needless to say, it was a really, really long time ago, and no one during the Ming dynasty would worry about whatever, chemotherapy that he is worried about didn't even exist back then.
Or assume that, like, in the ensuing years that it's going to just be fixed or resolved, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's 400 years. They'll figure it out.
Yeah. So it sounds like we might worry about it, but it would have to be pretty convincing that it was actually going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, like, climate change is an existential crisis.
That's what I thought of too.
That much, right?
I mean, like, total destruction of the planet. I'm like, that's what we are doing. That's literally what we're doing.
Right.
We're just doing it a little bit slowly.
It's not even 400 years in the future. It's good. Like, planet's going to die in like 100 years or whatever. But everyone's like, the scientists will figure it out. So another interesting point that I think talking about the main show again that Tim picked up and maybe Amin picked up right away is that we were talking about Wade and how they picked up almost immediately how he's a sociopath and how he, just tries to he gets pleasure out of seeing people fail or having, being uncomfortable or feeling bad, right? Like, he feels good when other people feel bad. And he kind of taunts and tortures Chengxing the whole time. And specifically, like, saying, oh, by the way, the guy who's about to die gave her the star, knowing that he's going to die. And then knowing that she was, like, really interested and knew who was going to give it to her. And so that obviously plays, like, a really big part in the rest of the story, the kind of dichotomy of Chengxing's philosophy versus Wade's philosophy, to the point where Wade tries to kill her in the next chapter or the next part or next episode. One thing that I found is, like, one of the most annoying parts of Reddit is the people who just, like, glom onto Wade and they have, like, Wade gang and that kind of stuff. And, like, I don't know where that comes from or why people do that, but it's really annoying on Reddit. Yeah. Yeah. Like, you see, like, these people, like, posting about Wade and, like, that is not supposed to be a guy that you're really supposed to like, I think, or maybe I'm just reading it that way. Like, there's not one time in the whole book that I liked Wade or that I thought I was meant to like Wade. I don't know. Was that your experience as well?
I mean, there are characters I like. I just wouldn't ever call myself Wade Gang or Chengxing Gang.
Right.
But I think you probably see them more than I do because you do, like, the hard-hitting journalism and research and recruiting.
I was going to ask if this is the last we see of Wade, or is there more of him? I guess one part of one book doesn't seem like a lot to glom onto, but also, I don't know.
So that should answer your question. Yeah.
Yeah, we see a lot more of Wade. He
Okay.
becomes, very pivotal character in a pivotal foil for Chengxing for the rest of the
and sort of arguably the most powerful human being in the solar system for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Not forever.
Yeah, not even arguably. He probably is.
But yeah, he just is.
Right. I mean, I think, like, maybe the reason people kind of hang on to him is that he makes those kind of militaristic decisions, that people maybe want. They want that strongman type. They want that person that's not going to care about killing millions of people cognizantly. Like, Chengxing kind of does kill a lot of people with her decisions, but she doesn't do it on purpose, right? Mm-hmm. Like, where Wade is more explicitly saying, like, I'm going to kill a bunch of people. If I don't get my way, I'm going to, fire the antimatter bullets and kill a bunch of people so I can continue this research.
Yeah, but not even strangers. Like, he realized that someone in his own lab, who I think Chengxing has already met at this point in time, who would be an asset to his, like, work project. And he's like, oh, that guy would be an asset to my work project, but he needs to have cancer in a terminal way. So I think I'm just going to
give him cancer because it might advance my work project. And that's never something Changxin does.
Right. Or would do.
Right. But he is, he does appeal to a certain kind of fairy tale mentality. I know we talk about Yun Tianming as like the character from a fairy tale, but fairy tales are often very dark. And I think it's arguable that Wade does have that sort of mythical fairy tale aspect about himself as well.
Yeah. I don't know. It just seems like he just appeals to people who like that kind of strong, quote unquote, strong dictator kind of model to not make us think and just like rule us all with an iron fist, right? And like he'll figure it out and like we'll be better for it, that need that kind of figure. Or maybe they hate Changxin that much where they're just like anybody who shoots her and goes against her, right? Although yeah, eventually just like even like Wade gives in to Changxin's will. So there was another interesting interview that I found that someone posted on the 3-Body Reddit. That was an interview with Li Zixin from back in 2011, talking about his decisions on her character. And I thought it gave some pretty interesting insight that I hadn't heard before. Obviously we know that he's not or hadn't up to this point been super strong on characterization. We get a little bit of backstory on characters like Yue Jie, but not much on even in Luo Ji. We don't get that much backstory other than the very like surface level. But I think Changxin and Changxin, we get a lot of backstory for her, or no, not backstory, but like a lot of her inner monologue, right? And her thoughts around stuff. One of the interesting quotes that I found was, so the question was the disagreement with, and this is translated from Chinese in Google Translate, so forgive any weirdness with the translation. I'm not a professional Chinese translator, but it says the disagreement with Changxin may affect readers' sense of substitution and identification with the novel. Have you worried about that? And the Zixin says, the person who wrote this didn't think about the reader like it. This is not the person the readers would like. She's actually very selfish, but it is this kind of selfishness is different from ordinary selfishness because she can't notice it. People who follow morals are actually very selfish because they don't care about anything except for morals and conscience. Changxin is such a person. She will think she will be very noble, that she is not selfish, and that her values and ethics are universal and correct. As for the consequences of following it, she only considers whether she can make her consequences peaceful. So I thought that was an interesting way, that he was thinking about that character, that she is actually not heroic herself, and that she's actually being selfish and not wavering from her ideals. And she doesn't throughout the book. She wants to do things her way, even because she thinks they're right. And I think, as me as a reader, I also thought her ways were more or less right, even though they lead to kind of disastrous consequences. But I think better that than the more militaristic way of dealing with it and just killing people, not buying into the dark force principle, I guess. That's kind of a long, rambly prelude, but I know, Thalia, you had also done some reading on this article. Did you have more thoughts on it?
I did read this article, and I thought that this interview, he really kind of clapped back with a shorter quote that I can read now. You say people don't like the protagonist, but actually people don't like themselves, which, I mean, isn't that true? In his sense, right. He's saying Changxin is what you would do. Like, would you really push that button? Amin already said earlier, like, wait a minute, wouldn't that be like mutually assured destruction for Earth as well? Yes, and most people would not do that. And she's just very ordinary, and that's in line with some universal values that like a child would know. It's precisely this choice. He says it's this choice that pushes human beings to extinction, but it's also like she is sending Yun Tianming's brain, even though she's horrified at the idea of it. She's like, well, we need to give him food. She's the one who assures that he has food. And without that, like, I don't know that their whole plan would ever survive. They just assumed that he'd be like put into a little jar and kept awake with like alien superfluids. And she was like, nope, humans need food. And she's responsible for that. And it's these series of choices that I continue to think drive the plot forward in a really interesting way.
Yeah, I thought this whole interview, I don't know why I hadn't seen these points of view from him specifically. Like maybe I just hadn't sought them out, but yeah, I'll definitely link it in the show notes because I think there's a lot of interesting perspectives. If you can deal with the Google Translate version of it, because someone translated it on just like the small part of it on Reddit, but didn't translate the entire article. But the whole thing has like a lot of interesting insights.
I don't know because I haven't read the original article or the translated version, but when you said like the reader's sense of substitution, I didn't know what that meant.
Disagreement with Changxin may affect readers' sense of substitution and identification with it. Yeah, I took it as like the people, because people don't like Changxin, like the people's, I don't know, like identification or like the sense of liking the book, you know, like people identify with the book is or substituting themselves in the book, right?
Oh, okay.
Might be affected. That's how I took it anyway. And that, again, that's Google Translate translating Chinese, and so like who knows how good of a job they're doing.
Well, whether you like her or hate her or haven't made up your mind, she does stay with us for quite a while. So I think this ends with Chongqing hibernating to the future. And one of the reasons Dan was saying, you know, the timelines get all screwy is because this happens more than once. So you do want to keep track of characters because they move through time in interesting ways.
Yeah, and I think it's cool how she doesn't just she doesn't follow like Luo Ji's timeline, but she, like, we start out like in Deterrence era already. Mm-hmm. Like she jumps way into the future. And I think the next chapters are, I mean, like the whole book's awesome. As I like look at every chapter, like I was like, oh man, next chapter is all about the sword holder stuff. And yeah, like the countdown of like the precise minutes that happen between like her taking the button, the Trisolarans like attacking. And plus next episode, we also get the stuff with the Bronze Age, which I know you really like.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if you get a chance to listen to the main show yet, because I just put it up like yesterday. But so one kind of funny thing is like I was telling Tim to avoid the chapter names and to not look at them because they contain spoilers. And he was like, "Well, I saw that the title for the next one is called Bronze Age. So I guess we're going back to the Bronze Age." And I was like, "Nope, you're not spoiled on it."
Great.
So, I mean, I don't know if you remember, but Bronze Age is actually one of the ships that escaped.
It's one of the ships, yeah. And I thought in that table of contents they put it in italics, so that's how I remembered there was a ship. I would have thought the same thing as Tim had I not noticed that.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a billion ship names to remember.
I know, but there's so many misleads. Because he does list like 40 names of ships. And they're like Western heroes and they're old Chinese names. And then like one page later, it's like they've all been destroyed. Yeah. And then you think that some are the ones who are going to survive. And then actually, you know, it switches. And the one you thought was going to survive actually was just another casualty.
Yeah, especially with like Zhang Beihai on one of them, right? Like you figured that one's going to make it, but nope. And then like the one that destroys him, like that doesn't even make it. It's the one that destroys him, right? So yeah, lots of twists. And yeah, lots of and then Bronze Age is not even the one that is important,
about.
Right?
That's what I'm talking
yeah.
about.
So wait, so we spend time with a ship that really doesn't matter?
No, it matters.
It matters a lot. It just doesn't.
Okay.
You know, make it.
Right. So, I mean, Thalia talked about this in a previous Spoilercast where the Bronze Age, they kind of trick it into coming back saying, hey, you guys can actually come back. It's okay. We understand what you did. But they do not understand what they did, and they put them on trial for it, for basically the Battle of Darkness. And they also try to trick the other ship to coming back to, and they don't. It's a very consequential ship in the story wise, I think, and a really cool chapter, like an interesting way to tell it because it's like Thalia mentioned before, it's kind of written as a court document, you know, like a court transcript of how the trial goes down. And then, you know, humanity's reaction to something like the Battle of Darkness. Like I kind of try to see this in an unspoiler way to see, like, what is humanity's reaction going to be to the Battle of Darkness? Are they going to understand that everyone's low on resources? And so like they're going to understand like the actions they took to kind of fire on the other ships to take their resources, or they're not. And it turns out they do not. They put them on trial for crimes against humanity or something like that. Lots of crimes against humanity in these books. Yeah, like the last thing I had was, kind of reading through this book, I wanted to kind of pull out some sentences that I thought were interesting and kind of foreshadowing some things that are going to happen. And I picked out two, and I think Thalia, you added another one. So the two I found were both specifically talking about the fairy tales, and so in referring to Tianming. And so one of the quotes is, throughout Tiamin's purchasing process, purchasing the star, the young women had stolen glances at him from time to time as though he was a figure from a fairy tale, which he kind of turns out to be sort of. I mean, I don't know if he's in the fairy tale, but he made the fairy tale. So, and the other one is, what an idiot I am. Did I think because I gave her a star out of love that she would return that love? Did I think she had flown across the Pacific to save me with her saintly tears? What kind of fairy tale have I been telling myself? So it's interesting that the term fairy tale has kind of popped up a bunch of times when it's a really pivotal part of this book and kind of turns the series on its the humanity on its head, right? Because like everyone's thinking changed after that time, and it's my favorite part of the whole series. So I'm really excited to get to it. And Thalia, you had picked another one, right?
Yeah, I said it a little bit earlier in the episode, but in Dingy's statement that life is stronger than metal and stone, which we'll come to test later, he does say soon means on the order of millions of years, a blink of an eye in geological terms. He's already thinking like a cosmologist, not like, someone who has a very planetary mindset, as Rick would say.
So I think the quote about where he says, "Did I think because I gave her a star out of love, she would return that love?" That foreshadowing I picked up on. That one was not subtle, and again, not knowing actually what happens. That one I thought was pretty clumsily telegraphed, but the other two I did not know about. So that's interesting.
It reminded me, like in the because I picked out the titles for each episode before the season started, and I named the final episode "Our Star" because that's what the title is called. And I was like, is that too much of a spoiler? I mean, but it doesn't mean what you think it means. I mean, it kind of does, but like I don't know. There's a lot more meaning to it than that. But I kind of struggle with that a little bit. I really tried hard to not give spoilers in the titles, but I thought that I just love that term so much because it's so consequential to the entire story.
That's right.
All right. Well, any more thoughts on this part? And I guess what things are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to everyone going to rehydrate.space and reading my bio, which is brand new, making its debut on our website.
And you can read Amin's too. It's very, very thorough.
Yeah. It is. Set aside a few hours to go through my bio when you're at rehydrate.space.
I think you have a dedicated URL. I think
that's right. That's
for
right.
each host. So.
And I would say I'm definitely looking forward to the episode of the main show that I'll be on. So the finale. That's what I'm looking forward to.
It's a little bit away, but yeah, by that time, like we won't have the spoiler cast and the main show will be a one thing. We can just talk about everything. It'd be nice to like not have to like couch all my what I'm trying to say, and like hopefully it's not a spoiler or like try to be coy about stuff. So
You're good on the main show.
I think
to that. You don't like let a lot slip. I think that's great.
I think about it a lot because I am very spoiler averse myself, and I would hate to be the person that spoils stuff for people. But at the same time, like I do have additional context around the show, so I would kind of want to like nudge people in the right direction to like look for specific things. So hopefully that comes across, and it's enhancing the experience for people who don't care about spoilers and also do care about spoilers. So I appreciate it. Amin, how about you? What are you looking forward to?
So I've generally decided that the plot points in this book are MacGuffins, more or less. So the characters don't matter. Really, it's just an opportunity for scientific and sociological exploration. So I'm looking forward to that part of it because, yeah, I think in general these aren't character-driven books, but they're event-driven books, and I'm looking forward to the events.
I thought it was interesting in the interview that Dan and I had read before the top of the show to see Liu Cixin say exactly the same thing. He said that these are not women I like. He was asked about the women that he writes, and he said, they're not women that I like. They just move. They're tools to drive the plot. But what was interesting to me is that he named 3 heroines for his book. And he claimed the rationale of Ye Wenjie. I think I can give him that. The dreaminess of Zhuang Yan, and the benevolence of Cheng Xin.
And Changxin, we'll see, but I just did not read Zhuangyan as the heroine of book 2, if someone had described her that way.
Yeah, it's basically like a non-character.
But he also writes very stereotypical male characters as well. It's not that
definitely.
he only doesn't know how to write. Lest someone think, I know no one said this, but lest someone thinks that we're just picking on him for not knowing how to write female characters. I don't think he writes male characters all that convincingly either. Or he doesn't write male characters outside of traditional tropes, I guess, that much.
Well, I hope your opinion of him not being able to characterize people does change a little bit, or softens anyway, because I do think that she is characterized very well, and you do care about her as the story progresses, and especially towards the end. I think that her story gets intertwined with Yun Ming towards the end. It becomes super powerful and heartbreaking at the end. So hopefully, like, your opinion is changed, or at least altered slightly. It's not totally the scientific concepts. I will totally agree that they are awesome in the sense that they are full of awe towards the end of this book. But I think the characterization is also vastly improved throughout this book.
Thanks for listening. Leave comments by emailing us at rehydrate@fastmail.com or on Twitter @RehydratePod. Please join us next episode for The Sword Holders, the first half of part 2 of book 3, Death's End by Lucy Shin.